Welcome to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, where we provide constant improvement to businesses through timely, actionable financial solutions. Do you want answers to your financial questions? Email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com. I'm your host, Mark Valesky. Now let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Kaizen Time. I'm joined by Brian Bride, Director of Payroll Operations. Brian, what have you been watching lately, like on TV?
So I'm a big movie guy, but the one show we watched Landman.
Landman. And I'm guessing that's about some guy who's out in the land, it's gonna sound weird, being manly.
Yeah, it's about the oil industry in Texas.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What do they do?
So it's about the oil leases and things like that, and how dangerous it can be, and how much money's there, and all this crazy stuff happens. I highly recommend it. It's a pretty wild show.
Okay. Well, that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, except that what you should be watching, which is compliance. Nice little segue I did there. I know I'm just patting myself on the back right now. But, compliance is a big deal. We've talked about compliance quite a bit on this podcast, and you need to watch it. So actually, I'm going to go right back to Landman here. Is there some compliance that they didn't do in the show? These oil jobs are dangerous.
It's very dangerous. There's an episode where there's sulfur, but they were compliant because they had on their little gauges and started beeping, right? Because it's kind of like a gas, right? Mm-hmm. So they're able to escape and be well when other people had passed away because they didn't have the little badges on them. So yeah, there's a lot of compliance and there's a lot of safety things. A lot of people get hurt. I
feel like we're getting way off subject, but I gotta ask: when you watch these shows, you're watching them for work stuff, right? You're like, the compliance there.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's a really really important industry. So looking to see, all right, well, are they following the rules, right? Are they following what they should be doing? Are they wearing their badges? Are they have enough people on the crew? A lot of many things they have to do in order to be compliant, or to pump the oils successfully and safely.
Okay. All right. So let's really get into the kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're going to talk about, which is compliance, and what employers should be kind of watching for.
Yep.
What are kind of the big ones? What are the big ones?
So the really big one is the difference between federal and state. So for federal compliance, when it comes to payroll, is your 940, which is your federal unemployment. That's an annual filing. And your 941 is quarterly. That's probably not going to change, right? I mean, it could, but it's pretty ingrained where you have to fill it out. That's your business, right? Reporting how much money you paid your employees, how much you held in taxes to match up with your deposits. Now, state by state, that's going to really vary. Some have quarterly filing, just like the 941. Some you do per month. Some you have to list, you set to report wages every month, but then you only file quarterly to reconcile. So there's many, many different versions of the filing status and filing frequency you have to be aware of. So that's where it can be confusing. If you have a monthly requirement for a state, but you want to file your taxes quarterly, when you file your federal, you're not going to be compliant anymore. And with the expansion of paid leave and paid medical leave and the other programs the states are running, those are all different agencies. So you could have 3 different returns for one state, and they're all filed on 3 different frequencies. So you really have to have that locked down. That's why having a payroll provider, a service bureau, is really important because they know when those are. But being on track of that is really, really important.
But like you said, a lot of these, they're not changed. The process is still going to exist. How it's getting done shifts.
Yes.
Not dramatically, but there are little tweaks and nuances, and that's why the payroll operations are very important.
Right. So, let's say you hired one person remote in the state, and then, maybe you're only filing quarterly, but then you hire a couple more people in the state. When you deposit more money, they want it more frequently. It can move from quarterly to monthly, and keeping track of that is really important. That's why you need your own logins. So all the states have logins to your tax accounts. Now, a service bureau will have a third-party login that we can see your information and help file on it. But you really want your own so that you can keep track of any changes. They'll notify you through email. They'll mail it too, but email is usually more efficient because people are almost always on their computers or their phones. So they tell you, hey, we changed your filing status. So that kind of is really, really important to have your own login so you can see if it ever changes.
Okay, and that's, for example, what YPD would have. You guys have your login, so you get notified of whatever changes.
Yeah, we review it, once a year. So we're starting to review that now. We'll go in and look to see, changes in rates, changes in filing frequency. But if you maybe running payroll your own, or you have a service bureau that's more self-service, you might need to be on your own for that kind of stuff. But so you need to pay attention.
Okay.
The other thing to look at is 1099 versus W-2. I know we've had multiple stories on this, but just to make sure that that if they're a contractor is very different from a W-2 employee. So states can have different classifications, like California and New York. If you operate there, the chance of you having a contractor is way lower than maybe another state that they might qualify. So making sure you understand the rules for that is really important.
And I just want to add in, because we've talked about it, this is very important. You screw this up, and it's devastating.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You get fined by, the state for not filing taxes. You get fined by the state for not filing labor laws. You get federal government can come after you. So yeah, there's a lot of different problems that can be there. Increasingly, there's minimum wage changes. So there's about 19 jurisdictions now that have an index minimum wage that just changes January 1st with no law passed. So you have a state like Illinois that through 2025 raised it to $15, and then there hasn't been any legislation since. There's other states that they index to inflation, or they index it to a different number. So January 1st it changes. Then you have state, really big cities. So if you're in a New York, you're in a Chicago, you're in a LA or San Francisco, you have a local minimum wage that's different. Like Chicago's is higher. And Chicago changes theirs in July instead of January like everybody else. So knowing when that changes is really a big thing. So making sure the minimum wage of your jurisdiction is really, really important. Then PTO, the only state that pulled back a PTO policy last year was Missouri. They removed the mandated PTO. It's going to be added in every state. Maybe not Texas, but almost every other state. I can see it being in there. So you're always going to have that. Like if you don't have a vacation policy, you're going to have to offer at least sick leave to some folks. So that's really, really important to track too.
So what I'm hearing is my friends in Missouri, I'd be like, hey, can you guys come up? And they'll be like, no, I don't have any time off.
Yeah, I don't have any time off anymore. It's taken away.
Okay, so it's what I'm hearing is just it is required by virtually every state except for Missouri. They just took that benefit away.
They took it away. Yep.
Okay. Yep. But I do want to ask though, a lot of these people who work there who had that benefit, the employers aren't just going to rip it out and be like, nah, we don't got to offer this anymore. But they could. They could,
right? So it really affects some of the lower income, lower wage people where maybe you didn't have sick leave before. But like in Illinois, you do. You have a paid leave. If you work 30 hours, you get an hour. Mm-hmm. So, it's to cover like going to a doctor or things like that, and you don't really have to miss very much. You still get paid for it. There's other things to look at too. Tip credits are going away. I don't know if a lot of people know how it works, but like if you go to a restaurant, they pay a server in Illinois like $9.60 an hour, and the minimum wage is $15. So their tips make up the difference. So it's called a tip credit. So if you're a tipped employee, you can get paid less, but you still have to pay minimum wage. So there's a true up at the end of the night or end of the 2 weeks or a week, where if you worked 5 hours, if you didn't get paid $75 in tips and wages, the business has to pay you. So that tip credit is going away in a lot of states. I think there's 7 that don't have it anymore. Chicago's getting rid of it too. So pretty soon you won't be able to do that as an employer, right? So that's you sharing some of the costs with your customers, and it's the reason why a lot of restaurants are still around, honestly, right? When they move that tip, they can keep the prices under control. So that stuff kind of moving around too. So knowing that is kind of happening is really, really important.
Was there a lot of fraud with that, or do you know the reason?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really this like the kind of the movement from a non-tipping culture, right? Is like people feel, like during COVID, it was a pretty big thing to tip, right? You're just trying to help people out. But I think when we get further and further away from it, people feel like you should just pay them the full amount and I'll tip extra if I want. You shouldn't have to make up your wages with tips. It's more of a cultural thing. So some states like Minnesota hasn't had tip credit in a really long time, but most states are starting to try to like seg away from it.
Okay, fair. Okay. Let's get into the big payroll vendors.
Sure.
And what do you want to talk about with those?
Yeah. So, so one thing to do to kind of keep track of these is the rules. There's a couple things I suggest is that you can follow them on social media, and usually they'll put stuff out, right? Like I follow on like LinkedIn, like ADP and things. So they'll put out some compliance stuff. So I'll see some things. We also have like internal ones where we'll follow the state too. So a lot of times the state will have newsletters. So, Colorado, I get stuff from all the time. Washington, because they have some complex leave laws. They're always sending, here's a seminar to go over it, right? So if you're maybe more independent, you're running payroll on your own, you don't have a service bureau, or you're just really interested, you can sign up for those newsletters and start following those companies to gain more information about this. And I talk about this because we have a year-end checklist at YPD. So it's actually part of the responsibilities of our manager is to operate the year-end program. So it just gives us like September, we start talking about how many W-2s we need and things like that. And as we get closer to January, it starts to escalate. Like, did we order everything? Have we done test runs, right? So it's just businesses have a checklist for like the end of the year, right? So maybe, you have a new payroll person or it's documented like this is what they do in November, right? So it's like, what state are you in? Let's double check your logins. Did our frequency change or anything? Did we see that notice? Where can I find the minimum wage rules, right? That's usually on the labor site for the state. So do you have a link to the state labor site? You can just click it and I'll tell you what the new minimum wage is, right? Other labor rules are changing. We have a lot of employees in Illinois, Wisconsin, so we follow those closer, right? Paid leave, where can I find that? Is that being offered? And then PTO, is it mandated, right? So as more states bring those mandated PTO policies online, knowing where to find the information and phone, that's really, really important.
What I understand in all basics is, hey, I'm a small company. The less employees you have, the less you have to worry about. And also, if you're not in multiple states, that also makes things easier, less to track. It
sure does, yeah. But with the rise of remote work, almost everybody's almost a multi-state, right? Unless you have a manufacturing you're in. I mean, a large majority of our clients, they're in multiple states because they hire people in just different states because that's where the talent is, right? Especially you're in information business or something like that. It's really easy to find people, where the talent is.
Yep. And that's why it's important to stay on top of this. And that's why somewhere like a payroll and compliance company allows you to stay safe without having to become an expert.
Right. Yeah. So we have a whole policy at YPD. When you add an employee in a different state, we see it on the exception report. If you hadn't told us earlier, then we're reaching out like, hey, you hired this person. Here's what we need to do, right? Like, here's who we need to get, withholding from or unemployment from. Here's what, now let's review it for the policies, right? Example, I had somebody just ask somebody in Maryland. So I'd ask what county do they work in? Because Maryland has a county PTO policy if you are close to DC. If you're a different county a little further away, they don't have it. Mm-hmm. So it even gets that specific, like city, county level. So it's really important to do your research when that comes in.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell me about what employers should be watching for with their payroll?
Yeah, I really think that if you're only in one state and you have a checklist like, hey, in November, December, I'm going to go to these state websites and verify I have all the right information for January, I think you'd be really successful. You keep yourself pretty safe. But when you start getting multiple states and stuff, having that payroll software and having conversation like, hey, can you check this out for me? I think is really, really important.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, thanks.
You've been listening to Kaizen Time, part of the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. If you like what you heard, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs Plus Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com or email us at bsb@kaizencpas.com.